Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We have a special series today for STANA Live Sensory Insights, where we're actually pre-recording this conversation. And I'm joined today by Dia Kline, who I'm going to have talk all about herself. But before we get into that, I just want to quickly go over who we are, meaning STANA. So STANA is the Smell and Taste Association of North America, and we're the first patient advocacy group focused on smell and taste disorders in the USA, because believe it or not, as big as we are, we didn't exist until 2021, which is just wild. So Dia, welcome. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite. This is my honor.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you and showcase you for Anosmia Awareness Day. So I know who you are, but for the rest of our audience, can you please start off with a general introduction? Who are you? What do you do in the world of smell and taste?
Thank you very much. I am Dia Kline. I'm in Colorado, right outside of Boulder, for those of you that are familiar with the United States or Colorado. That's where I am. And I'm an actor and a comedian and a writer. So that's kind of my professional nugget, but I'm also a full-time congenital anosmic. And my role in the anosmic community, I have fallen into this role almost as an accident. My advocacy, my vocal prowess for wanting to express my experience led me into my role of advocacy. That's a big word for today. And awareness by having my alignment with Fifth Sense UK, which is the big smell and taste disorder support system out of England. And I'm one of their public ambassadors. And my job is to simply use my voice, use my experience, and talk to the world to raise awareness about anosmia.
That's pretty great. Fifth Sense are awesome global partners. They have a lot of really great resources. So if you're listening to this, make sure you check out Fifth Sense's resources online as well. The more information we can share about anosmia and the community with all of you, the better. So today, this is a special episode, like I said, to celebrate Anosmia Awareness Day. It's every year, February 27th, and this is actually the 10th year that this has been started. So it started back in 2012 by Daniel Shine, and it's already year 10, which is just amazing to me. So with all of that said, what does anosmia awareness mean to you, Dia?
Oh, such a great question, because this is the crux of the problem within the anosmic community. We don't even know what we're called. So many of us go through our entire lives not understanding how to define what it is that we are or our experience. We don't know the word anosmia. I did not know the word anosmia until maybe 7 years ago, and I didn't know the word congenital anosmia until maybe 5 years ago. It's this awareness that needs to be distributed globally for this experience, for this condition, for this lifestyle that we don't know how to call or define it. We're just simply unaware. So for me, anosmia awareness is bringing to the forefront that we exist, this experience is valid, and it has a name, because once you can name it, you can see it, you can define it, and you can find community around it.
I agree with you. There's not a lot of things that are known about anosmia, the word itself. For those who are listening, in addition to my role with STANA, I also run the Smell podcast, which is where I first met Dia, and I speak to people about their smell and taste disorder stories all the time. And what you just said really resonates with me, because it is very common that many people who have anosmia don't know that word for quite a while, even maybe after they have lost their sense of smell. One thing that I think has come out of the pandemic is that I think the fact that you can lose your sense of smell is more widely known. I don't know, do you think that the word anosmia itself has become more widely known, or just the fact that you can lose your smell?
I think it has, yes. I think the awareness of COVID and the effect of COVID has created more awareness for the word anosmia. I think it has created more awareness of the loss of smell being something that happens to people. But, you know, if you're going to flip to the other side of that coin, what it does is it's just laser focused, targeted to this one avenue of anosmia, which when you look at one avenue of something instead of the spectrum of something, then you define the whole thing as that one avenue, and all the other valid experiences are left at the wayside. And the congenital experience, which, as you know from the myriad of interviews you've done on the Smell podcast, congenital anosmia is an entirely different beast. It's an entirely different experience than acquired anosmia. And COVID has done a really good job of raising awareness of acquired anosmia.
That's true. So I want to speak with you a little bit about your diagnosis journey. And the reason I want to talk about this is because in addition to being hilarious, you make hilarious videos. So you actually have a video on YouTube, which I'll make sure that we share in the episode notes for today, where people can go and watch this for themselves. But you documented your diagnosis journey. So first off, why did that matter to you? Why did you want to get a diagnosis? And what was the process?
I wanted to get the diagnosis for a couple reasons. Timing wise, because we were in COVID and people started asking the question, can you smell, to qualify your entrance into a building? And they weren't very aware with how they were phrasing the question. It wasn't, have you lost the ability to smell? It was like, can you smell? And I started getting worried. It started feeling a little bit like you could be barred, you could be prevented. Like, it just was feeling a little uncomfortable. And as most congenital anosmics can attest, we've never been diagnosed. We've never had anybody put a name to it. And I felt like this was probably an important time. So timing was one factor. The other factor was education. Awareness. I decided that I should document my journey for the benefit of all the other people out there who have no idea where to start. I'm a system hacker. I love figuring stuff out. So I took this as a challenge. So I wanted to raise awareness. And so then the third level of why I did it was kind of silly and fun. This was the impetus. The National Park System in the United States has a program. It's called the Access Pass, and it's for people with permanent sensorial disabilities, and the pass allows them discounted and free entrance fees into national parks. It's a hidden perk to having a sensorial disability, and I thought this would be a good tag on for all the other reasons. Like, this would be a good thread to follow for the journey. So that's why I did that.
Well, I think it's pretty interesting because I don't remember exactly how many months it took you, but it was a months-long process, right? So can you talk a little bit more about that? What was involved in actually getting a diagnosis?
Yes. So my thought would be to call a doctor who knows me and say, hey, but don't remember if I've mentioned to you that I can't smell, if it's in my notes, but can you write me a diagnosis? Because I needed a letter. I needed an official diagnosis. So I called up my lady doctor, my gynecologist, because that's like where most women go every year.
Right.
And my gynecologist was uncomfortable talking about my nose. She wouldn't do it. So I started with a family doctor and I was turned down. So then I went straight to an ENT, and I had to call several ENTs, and I had to explain to them who I was, what my issue was, and what I needed. And I finally found one. And then I thought, okay, that was a lot of work. I guess I've crossed all the hurdles. So I go in and I'm like, hey, can't smell, never been able to smell. Can you write me a diagnosis? And this is where the process started.
Right.
Because he was not able to validate my experience by talking to me. He had to use the scientific process, which started with a scope up the nose and then the horrible, in my opinion, scratch and sniff test.
Yeah, the upsit I think you're referring to.
Yes, the standard in step 1 of a diagnosis for anosmia. So you go into an ENT, they're going to scope your nose, and they're going to give you the upsit, scratch, and sniff test, which for a congenital anosmic, for someone who's self-reported having never smelled, is a redundant test. It makes no sense. If I had said I'd lost my smell and you wanted to gauge about how badly I'd lost it, but I was self-reported 0.
Right.
So the first step, scope, scratch and sniff, and he wanted to prescribe steroids because that's the standard in the protocol for your diagnosis for anosmia. And I'm just going to put this PSA out there to everyone. Just say no. You don't need a steroid until you've been determined to need a steroid. A congenital anosmic is going to have 0 effect by being given a steroid. You're not going to grow anything back. My nerve won't just appear. My bulb won't just grow.
Interesting that there seems to be a standard set of steps that they have to take in order to diagnose you.
And he said, so do you want me to write down that you're refusing it? Like that kind of like medical threat?
Right.
Are you refusing treatment? Which kind of gets on that scary route of like, well, how is that going to affect my insurance? Or how is that going to affect the diagnosis, right? Because I'm making it incomplete. But I was like, no, I'm self-educated. I am asking you to update your protocol. Yeah, I am refusing. So he looked at my nose, didn't see anything particular, and he said, we need to schedule an MRI. If he had saw something weird, he would have done a CAT scan, but the MRI was the next step. So then that took weeks to get the MRI. So I go and get the MRI, and they're that long process of that, and then you get immediate results, but not a diagnosis, right? You just get the results with just the findings. And you are left, I was left for like a month trying to interpret the findings while I waited for the doctor's appointment to give me an official diagnosis.
Gotcha.
So now we're like 2 months into this process, and I'm reading my specific diagnosis, and there's just like an aside note that there's a hole in my head. There's a 9mm hole in my head. So I had to sit with this for a month. Then I go in to see my doctor, and my doctor, oh yeah, look at you. Yeah, there's just really nothing there. No bulb, no nerves, no tract. Yeah, you can't smell. So I said to him, so that steroid prescription you wanted to have me proactively take wouldn't have done me any good. He's like, no, you're right. And I said, and that upset test that you had me take to blind guess my 20% correct answers was absolutely useless for a self-reported congenital. He goes, yeah, you're absolutely right. Does it change anything? No, it didn't change anything. So then it took like almost 3 weeks to get the letter, like the official letter. My pride and joy. My official.
You framed it.
Isn't that the best?
So, okay, so this letter that you have here, does it basically state that you have a disability, or does it state that you have congenital anosmia? Let's hear it.
Okay, so this had to be very specific for, and remember, I'm gearing this to the Access Pass because I figure if it qualifies for this government-funded program, then the verbiage and the need of what's inside of the letter should match anybody else's ask of me. Okay, and I will tell you that I had to have them write it twice. Because the first time, the word permanent was not in there. Gotcha. And the Access Pass required the word permanent. So this is what it says. Dia Kline has been diagnosed with severe, complete congenital anosmia. The diagnosis was based on exam, history, MRI imaging, and the University of Pennsylvania Smell Identification Test, the upset. The results of this workup are considered reliable. Please let this letter serve as an affidavit of her permanent sensory disability.
Gotcha.
Boom! That was hard hard work. That was, I'm going to say 3 months of work, and of course all the insurance. And then here's this, I start hearing back from people who have been inspired by my video, who are
Right.
taking my steps and applied them to their lives. And I've had 2 people tell me they've gotten it. No, 3. 3 people tell me they've gotten it because of me. The first person went to his family doctor and they just wrote the letter.
Interesting.
No test. None at all. The second person, she said, "Oh, I just was in a park and they had one of those guard houses and they issued me a card." Without talking, what?
Right? Yeah.
And then the third guy, he's like an Indian American citizen, and he was like, "I just went to my doctor and asked for it and got it." And I'm like, how did my journey become so in depth, so drawn out for 3 months, and all they did was ask? Well, perhaps that's your relationship with your doctor. Perhaps that's just the luck of the draw. But my experience is, I would say, typical for the extended full medical appraisal of what would happen, what to expect.
I think you're right. Maybe it depends also because the USA is so big and so different in each place and location that maybe there's different standards. Maybe it's how the doctor's feeling that day. But I do think that what you experienced is probably typical. I was actually speaking with my mom recently about this, and I went through the entire same process that you did, but back in '09.
Okay.
But I didn't ever get a letter. It was just they were trying to rule out causes for my anosmia, right? So they were trying to treat it. And so I went through the same steps as you with family doctor, ENT. I even saw a neurologist. But at the time, I didn't think to keep any of that. So I was actually speaking to my mom recently and saying, is there any way I could access these documents from '08, '09? And she's like, it would be easier for you to just start over at this point. So I'm actually like thinking about that just like for myself. I would be interested to know if I did this process again, would it be very similar to yours? Family doctor, ENT, all of those things.
Yeah. And again, I think the acquired journey and the congenital journey might differ a little, because the truth in your findings, there might be the hesitancy to say permanent. Well, it could come back.
That's true.
Right? Because they're going to look up your nose, like you still have a bulb, right? You still have the nerves. So you're, an idiopathic acquired anosmic.
Yep.
I guess you're right. Depends on the day and the flavor of the doctor. Do I feel like putting down she could have a permanent disability or temporary, like we have to recheck you every 5 years to verify?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's been 12, 13 years. So maybe they, just in case, it might come back, it might come back. Who knows? I don't think it's going to, but it always could.
It always could.
So I do want to talk with you a little bit about the other video that you've created online, talking about your journey to get your diagnosis. That was one. But then you've also as far as I know, the Toastmasters speaking challenges, and you competed in one of these speaking challenges. And what you chose to speak about is basically your journey and getting the access pass and claiming anosmia as a disability. And my goodness, people get very riled up by this. And I want to state that what I personally feel is that it can be a disability. For me, it is considered as such. But I also know that there are many people who are very, very against that. So I'm on record as saying, I don't know what the correct answer is. It could be this, it could be that. However, I personally do agree with you that I do think that anosmia is a disability. So let's talk about this. First off, let's look at your shirt.
Let's look at my shirt. I wore this special.
The disability. Yep. Exactly. It's not a bad word.
It's not a bad word.
Let's talk about the video you made, the speech that you gave about this.
Thank you. So yes, my speech is called "What's Your Sign?" And it's about the misinterpretation of the word disability. It's about these other big words, called ableism and internalized ableism. It also leads into disability and disabled. How are those related? And it turns all this information into the history of the handicap sign and the misinterpretation of the handicap sign equating with the disability sign. So my speech is my journey and my claiming of the word disability and my hope of informing and raising awareness about the need to understand the languaging better. Because the languaging, I think, is really convoluted. And this was what I wanted to set out to improve, to open the discussion. Much like, I have a great comparison. So much like when you watch an older sitcom, like even Friends, and they start using derogatory language against the LGBTQ community, you know, they start using like queer and fag and stuff like that in a derogatory way. And everybody accepted that. Everybody accepted that humor associated with this improper languaging. Mm-hmm. And then our awareness was raised. And then we started having bigger discussions. And then we started opening our minds to the community and understanding how hurtful and how wrong it was to speak about people in this way. So I think the word disability kind of lives in this world where we haven't raised awareness enough. We haven't opened it up enough, and we haven't examined the languaging and the definition, because people are so affronted and they're knee-jerk reactive. And when you're knee-jerk reactive, it usually means you are not educated on the subject. It just means you're reacting personally to how you're feeling and what your definition is, which doesn't necessarily mean it's the true definition.
Yeah, I will make sure that we include the link to this video as well so that people can check it out. But it's definitely something that I've noticed through conversations on the podcast, through conversations with people in my role with STANA. People are very uncomfortable with the word disability. They don't like it. They seem to think it means that you are asking for something. I've noticed some comments on your video itself where I don't think they actually watched it for what you said. And
I pulled that sign. I held that handicap placard, Katie. I did it on purpose.
Exactly.
I did it as a triggering mechanism.
Right.
Because I wanted people to really get what I was saying and to really feel and see their knee-jerk reaction. And what you saw in those comments were people's knee-jerk reaction. How dare you? How dare you say that your inability to smell deserves a handicap placard so you can park close to the store? I would never.
Right.
And it's like, that is 100% not what my speech is about, but you, fell into my trap. You didn't even listen to me.
It's interesting. It is really interesting. And I'm glad that you and I are having this conversation because I think that it will help others to think about it. And again, we're not telling you what to think. I think what I'm asking is that you just think about it. So for me, I do think claiming it as a disability is important because it's opening our worldview of what is disabled. What does that mean? And it's invisible. And I think that's a problem for some, because for some people, maybe they believe that you can only say that you're disabled if you can visually see something is wrong, which is problematic. So that's another thing with the conversation around disability that I wanted to chat with you about is maybe you've heard this as well, but a lot of people that I speak with will say, yes, I think it's a disability, but it's not as bad as X, Y, or Z. Why do you think we do that?
Well, we as humans, I think, live in a world of comparison. We are a comparative culture. The grass is greener. Your baby's developed at this rate. Mine's developed at that rate. So the only way that we understand kind of the human experience is in this scope of comparative. And when you do that, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it can be really damaging and dangerous if you don't understand what's happening. And so this world of comparisons lives really strongly in the community of people who have disability, because they look at their disability, and this is where internalized ableism comes in, where you look at somebody else's and you go, well, that's actually disabled. I'm not disabled. I don't need help or accommodation. I'm not that bad, right? Which then all of a sudden puts this ableistic view on this person who has different disabilities than you, and looking at them as being less than because they're not an able-bodied human. And so, well, I'm physically able-bodied and they're not. Ooh, comparative. Well, I'm not that bad. So then that internalized ableism comes where you're saying, it's just, I'm fine. Most of my life is totally fine. I don't need any help. It's not as bad as something like that. I just don't need help. I don't need support. I'm fine. Which the definition of a disability is an inability to do something. It's a person that has an inability to do certain things and interact in a certain way with the world. Right. So glasses, right? Glasses are my favorite comparative. You wear glasses, right? Because you can't see well, or, nearsighted, farsighted. You have an inability to see clearly. So if I took those glasses away and glasses didn't exist, well, maybe your disability is you shouldn't be allowed to drive because you can't see the road, or you're illiterate because you can't read the words. That's a full-blown disability. But we're lucky that glasses exist because it's a visual aid. So we put them on, and now our disability becomes an afterthought. Oh, I don't have a disability. I just wear glasses.
Right.
My disability is nothing. At least my legs work.
Yeah.
Or at least I can see. Ooh, poor them. Right? And we're assuming a disability onto the person, the other. Where having, being disabled is irrelevant to what type of disability you have. Being disabled is just, it's a limit to your physical, mental, or cognitive or developmental abilities. It's limited. So a disability doesn't have a limit. A disability is just a need for aid.
Right.
And people, and this is the triggering thing. And thank you, ADA. Thank you for the creation of the ADA and the support it does for all of our disabled, however they define it, people with disabilities, whatever their definition is. But it was really strongly focused around people with mobility issues, and it was like about riding the bus and getting into buildings. Like that was the biggest major focus for we need equal access. Mm-hmm. And that handicap sign and that beginning idea for why the ADA exists, that has combined to make everybody think that saying disability equals handicap, which is a outdated pejorative word, but it equals a mobility disability. Your disability is not a disability unless it's a mobility disability. And that's what our world has knee-jerked.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
That's our knee-jerk right now. And my goal in writing that speech, open the door. Like, it's okay, calm down, just please listen. This is a whole bigger spectrum. This is a bigger conversation. And it's just one of those things, Katie, where it's going to need really visible dialogue. It's going to need popular opinion. It's going to need to show up everywhere. It's this, again, going back to the damaging language that we had against the queer community. It didn't stop until it took big moments.
Yeah. And to your point, it's open the door and allow more people access. It is true that it has mostly been considered mobility issues. And I think there's room enough for all of us, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
So, to your point, I think that if people who have invisible disabilities also claim them as such, it's not taking away anything from those who do have mobility disabilities. So yeah, that's an excellent point. A great thing.
Yeah. I think you said it so beautifully right there, Katie. It's the taking away, right? That there's limited resources and that we are usurping the line and we are taking away from people who are more deserving.
Got it. Yeah.
When disability doesn't have a line of deserving.
Right. Absolutely. I
It
agree.
just is.
Absolutely. So lots of good things to think about, everyone who's listening.
Watch my video. Don't just judge it by the
By the thumbnail. Yeah.
That was a triggering mechanism. I meant to do that. Watch the video.
Yes, please do. And again, I'll make sure to include that. So I do want to kind of change gears here. And like I said in the beginning, happy Anosmia Awareness Day to everyone. The goal of these conversations is to raise awareness about that. And I kind of want to pivot a little bit. And it's a unique pivot because you happen to have congenital anosmia, as you said. And today is Anosmia Awareness Day. Tomorrow happens to be Rare Diseases Day. And what I find fascinating is that congenital anosmia classifies as a rare disease, while acquired anosmia does not. But, which is just interesting. But my question for you, how do you feel about the fact that congenital anosmia is considered a disease?
Yeah, another one of the words, right? Another one of these triggering words. I don't have a disease. Okay, so I looked up the definition of disease and I'm going to read it just as perhaps a preemptive help, okay? So definition of disease, Merriam-Webster. A disease is an abnormal condition that negatively affects the structure or function of all or part of an organism, and that is not due to any immediate external injury. Diseases are often known to be medical conditions that are associated with specific signs and symptoms. Excuse me. So that definition didn't sound so bad. Doesn't sound like,
No.
okay, comparative, right? Oh, well, it doesn't sound like I have cancer. It's not that bad, right? We've got to compare. Can't just stand on its own. But when you just look at the root of what it is, a disease are associated with known medical conditions with specific signs and symptoms. All right, it absolutely is it's a disease, but it's just simply an old word that
Right.
we have a knee-jerk reaction to, that we think you're saying something.
Yeah. So before I became involved in this community, I was unaware of both Anosmia Awareness Day and Rare Diseases Day. So do you plan to celebrate Rare Diseases Day at all?
Absolutely. Just like my birthday, I believe in a birthday month. So I believe in congenital anosmia, anosmia awareness, invisible disease awareness all the time. Absolutely. Anything I can do to extend a celebration, to keep promoting my position and my awareness platform, yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
That's awesome. So Dia, kind of to wrap up our conversation, this is a question I like to ask at the end is, do you have anything else that you'd just like to share that maybe I didn't ask you about directly or that you just want to shout out?
I want to shout out as loud as I can the word anosmia. I just want to keep using this word every way I can. I wear shirts that talk about anosmia because I want people to look at me and go, what is that? Because if I'm not speaking, how am I raising awareness? Well, I'll wear a t-shirt as a billboard to get you curious about me. And by shouting the word anosmia, that I hope creates curiosity and questions and thought that, oh, this is a thing. I never heard of it. Now I have, and now I'm educated, and maybe then that person will stand as a resource to someone in their life down the line. Wait a minute, I've heard of this. This is a thing, right? It's building blocks. And so all I can say is, for those of you who know the word, say the word, use the word, talk about it. Don't hide in the shadows. Your anosmia is what it is. If you're scared of something and you leave it in the dark, when you talk about it, you shine a light. and it becomes not scary anymore. This is not scary. This is just is. We just are. And it's called anosmia, and we're called congenital anosmics. And we're different.
And we're here. You're there. I'm here. Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Dia. Last thing, where can people find you online?
Yes, please go to my YouTube channel, Dia Kline, and you can see all of my fun taste and smell videos, my speeches, other fun videos I do as an actor and comedian. So please visit me there. And you can find me on Instagram, Dia Kline Official, Facebook, Dia Kline Official. You can even connect with me professionally on LinkedIn, and I'll write your resume for you. It's all good. I do everything.
That's awesome. You do. You're a jack of all trades.
I know.
Well, thank you, Dia. Happy Anosmia Awareness Day, everyone. Thank you for watching this video, and we hope you have a really excellent day.
Smell you later. Just kidding. Never smell you at all.